Hello and welcome to the CEO Magazine CEO Shows with your host Nick Baidia. It is my hope that we'd be able to correctly present to you a dramatic yet real story of a person who came back from the brink of destruction through his practice of yoga. Yoga is not magic, nor is it cure-all, but it certainly is misunderstood and grossly underutilized according to him. If you brush your teeth every day, then you need to watch this conversation because it will be eye-opening about what you should be doing daily. Our guest today is Bhava Ram, who was a war correspondent with a broken back and stage 4 cancer. Who he is now is for you to watch and listen. So let us welcome Bhava
welcome to my show. I really appreciate you taking out your time, and I'm looking forward to an exciting conversation right now.
Thank you very much.
So Bhava, the thing I'm trying to do here is to create for the CEO level audience a compelling argument in favor of yoga and incorporating yoga in their organizations and trying to promote it because it has humongous value in my belief. But at the same time, I'm not taking my belief as the dictum, which certainly has no basis at all, but I am approaching a variety of people. I've talked to a professor from Harvard who is a proponent of yoga, has done a lot of research. I did that a couple of days ago. You might know Dr. Khalsa. Then I am also talking to Edgard Ernst, who is a big voice against all alternative medicine. I have also had a conversation with a WWF 3-time champion who is promoting yoga, because if he can do yoga, then I guess everybody can do yoga. And so that's one of the reasons. So I'm approaching it from multiple angles, and your background is extremely interesting. It's the kind of thing that Steve Jobs was trying and kind of unfortunately failed at. So I'm looking at yoga from your point of view, which is not necessarily purely empirical, scientific, but scientific nevertheless from an introspective and experiential perspective, which is a part of research. People don't recognize, but those conceptual pieces are as compelling, and they form the fundamental theoretical framework for going forward and testing hypotheses. So that said, I watched your TED Talks. So I've got a good background on you and your son and the story, but I'd like to, in short, for the sake of the audience, hear that once again quickly. What was your experience? What led to you to yoga, and where did you come from?
Well, I was probably the last person that you would ever dream of would come to yoga. I was a journalist in what I like to call, sort of jokingly, my past life now. I was a broadcast journalist, and it was a remarkable career. I worked my way up through local affiliate television stations throughout the country, ultimately to the network, to NBC News. And I say it was remarkable because it gave me such fulfillment. It really defined who I was, and I felt I was making a difference in the world. I was very type A. I worked very hard. It's a very competitive industry. I'm from a very middle-class family. I came from a small state college. Everyone else seemed to be from Harvard and Yale. So I knew I wasn't smarter than them, but I felt I could outwork them. That's that type A part.
And I know that you were a war correspondent, and you worked with Tom Brokaw and everybody.
Yes, and ultimately I was a war correspondent, but I had a secret for the last 7 years of my career. I had been in Afghanistan in 1986 during the Soviet occupation up there, living in the mountains with the freedom fighters, as you know, called the Mujahideen. And then I was in the refugee camps afterwards, very touched by the war wounded, especially the children. I actually brought a lot of children home with me back to the East Coast of the United States, where I lived at the time, for treatment of burns, missing limbs, shrapnel in their faces, napalm all over their bodies. After that, I took a rare vacation, and I went down to the Bahamas to a tropical island, and of all things, that's where I suffered a terrible injury. A storm came up the last night, and I crawled up to a high ledge to batten down storm windows in my type A way, and the handles were corroded. I twisted them really hard. They broke. I fell. I landed on the base of my spine. I actually thought I might die right there because I couldn't breathe. I couldn't inhale. Finally, of course, I breathed, but the pain was excruciating. But Type A, I'm going to work longer and harder than anyone else. I kept going for 7 years through the Persian Gulf War, through Africa during apartheid, through drug wars in South America, and so forth, gritting my teeth, chewing painkillers and muscle relaxers, and drinking a little more heavily every night. So my career is ascending. My mental health, my physical health is plummeting into an abyss, but I just couldn't stop. 7 years into that, it stopped me. I was in charge of all of Asia after the Gulf War. I was in the Philippines covering a story and actually leaned over to look at videotape in a nice hotel, and I had had a cracked vertebra in my lower spine all this time. It split wider open, started to impinge on my spinal cord. I blacked out, howling like a banshee, and was ultimately medevaced out. I had major back surgery back here in California, where I live now, and it failed, and I was confined to a body brace. So from a global life to a body brace where I could not sit up to eat a meal or walk without a cane. Heavier drugs, Vicodin, Valium, Prozac, and a host of other drugs that I can't even pronounce the names of. More drinking every night, and really hiding my profound depression because I lost my identity. The master of self-pity, anger, and fear in my life.
I bet a lot of people can relate to that. A lot of senior executives, alcoholics, we all can relate to that.
When you're wounded like that, you feel like you have no future, and a great despair can grip you, and it certainly gripped me. 4 years into this, my only child, a little boy, was born, and it gave me some hope that I did have an identity. I was a daddy, and even if I couldn't kick a soccer ball or carry him on my shoulders, I was a daddy. But 3 months into his beautiful life, I got very, very sick and was ultimately diagnosed with terminal cancer, stage 4, oral pharyngeal carcinoma that started in my throat, metastasized throughout my lymphatic system, ultimately learning that it came from exposure to depleted uranium in the Persian Gulf War years earlier that had been used by the American forces to pierce Iraqi tanks, and I had been on the front lines of most of those battles. Doctors said, get your affairs in order, you won't live 2 years. I got darker, I got more depressed. I pushed everyone out of my life except that little boy. I think it's the only person I was even a nice person around. And he was my only relationship. As he became 2 years old, just after he turned 2, and I was very close to dying, he finally understood in his own little way that Daddy's not making it. And he came to me, trembling, a little tear in his eye, and he said 3 words that changed my whole life. Get up, Daddy. Oh, it hit me in a place that I did not know existed, and it touched me at the level of soul. And for 2 or 3 weeks, this mantra, get up, Daddy, went through my mind every day. But how? I have a broken back. I can't walk. I'm dying of cancer. And I finally decided the way I can get up is get off all of these drugs that have really made me a monster to everyone except for this little boy. And one day someone will say, your daddy died with dignity. That's how your daddy got up.
Yeah, because you had so much despair that you couldn't think that you would ever be able to get out, but you can at least give a little child an experience, and also more importantly to you, that I've done right by my child, because child in all over the world is one of the greatest forces.
And they deserve that, you know. And so that was my idea of getting up, Daddy. And I checked into a hospital and I detoxed cold turkey. That was interesting. I can report as a former journalist that all of the demons in Dante's Inferno are real, because they came into that room and tore at my body and mind. I crawled out of there 7, 8, 9 days later, and delirious, really, not knowing what to do now. And the hospital invited me to an experimental mind-body clinic. I still have a little lack of throat moisture given the cancer I had, so excuse me. My little throat spray. And ancient Eastern Western modalities, they told me, with modern Western holistic techniques. I had no idea what they were talking about, but it was a lifeline, and I said, I'm in.
Yeah, for a type A personality, that's goofy talk. I mean, unless
Yeah,
you're really in the South Pole and there's nothing else, there's only north to go, would you ever try that?
you're so right. Jaded, cynical journalist, but I was in a mode of surrender and desperation, really. So I started the next day. I took a hotel very nearby the hospital. And the first day, I experienced biofeedback, where they hook you up to electrodes, take your galvanic skin temperature, your brain waves, your heart rate, etc., all your vital signs, and then they play you a guided meditation called a visualization that uses positive imagery. And I put on the headphones, I closed my eyes, this voice came on that, again, the type A cynical journalist would have poo-pooed, and everything changed. I felt a different inner chemistry take over my body in the 20 minutes that I listened to this tape by Dr. Emmett Miller, one of the founders of mind-body medicine in America. And at the end of that 20 minutes, I had my second epiphany after Get Up Daddy, and that was, I have a role to play, Nick, in whatever my healing journey or potential might be. My mind creates a different chemistry inside of my body. So I embraced that. I went back to the hotel. I started reading Dr. Miller's book. I had it overnight FedExed by the people at the hotel. And one of the very first chapters, I know he wrote for me, although I had never met him, even though he's a dear friend now. And it said, get over yourself and step up. It was a scientific, mature way of really saying, get up, daddy. Stop your self-pity. Stop your fear and your anger and your desperation and take charge of your life. And that's what I began to do. A month into this journey, still very pained, they had me start therapeutic yoga, something else I would have, dismissed earlier in my life. That was epiphany number 3. The minute I walked into that yoga room, I knew. I heard a voice inside of me, despite what theoretical scientists might think about this, that said, this is it. And I somehow knew this had the capacity to change my life, even though I was pain-racked. I was the stiffest person on planet Earth, even before I broke my back. I went back to the hotel, I ordered books, I started reading these ancient texts of yoga, and what I found was this amazing science, body, mind, spirit science. The science of how to be a human being, of how to align your life in a more natural way that creates a fertile ground for healing inside of you, as opposed to the fertile ground that most of us have for profound stress and medical challenges as a result of the poor decisions that we make as a result of responding to the stress that we have in our lives. And I embraced this too as a lifeline. A month or 2 into it, the clinic closed because the insurance companies wouldn't reimburse the hospitals for what they called alternative treatment. I knew 3 people in the program. It was a very small program. 2 of them went back to medications and alcohol. My best friend in the program committed suicide. I went home and built a yoga room in my house. And I started practicing 10 to 12 hours a day.
Yoga 10 to 12 hours a day.
Maybe a few hours of yoga poses. Few hours
of the meditation and the pranayama.
Positive affirmation. I changed I was a Western meat and potatoes guy. I had gained 80, 90 pounds in my body brace because I still ate like a foreign correspondent and drank like 5 foreign correspondents, but I was laying around all day. So I ballooned up.
So just to get this cleared up, the 10 to 12 hours a day, you're talking about things like actually reading. So it's called in Sanskrit, it's called Chintan. Chintan means you actually change your thinking by ruminating over things, by getting gyan, or what they call the knowledge. Yes. And then doing the pranayama, which is the breathing, the poses, the asanas, and certainly meditation.
Meditations and mantras as positive affirmations, because as we know from what modern medicine calls the placebo effect, your negativity or positivity has a tremendous effect on your healing capacity. So mantra was a powerful way of affirmation in the healing process. Learning to shift from self-pity, anger, and fear and despair to gratitude, forgiveness, compassion, loving kindness. And I became a pure vegetarian. I called it my organic chemotherapy. We now know there's a tremendous amount of scientific data that shows that protein from vegetables, from a plant-based diet, tends to shrink cancer tumors, whereas the proteins in meat and dairy products tend to grow them. Junk food makes everybody sick. I had a pure diet. I took 80 pounds off my body, and I think that was an essential part of my healing from stage 4 cancer. And all of the relaxation, the breath work, as you have mentioned, and the yoga postures, which were very gentle at first, opened my body to a point that even now, though I have a broken back, I have a profound level of flexibility and balance. I have much more body thinness, so much less body weight on my spine that's still broken. I very rarely have back pain, and when I do have it, I know what to do about it now, and it's no longer, pills and despair.
And I've seen your poses. You are actually able to perform all those yoga poses despite your back injury?
Yes, I mean, I can put my legs behind my head, even though that's really not the ultimate goal of yoga, and I don't want to do circus tricks for people, but my body's unbelievably flexible now and open, and that makes your life force flow, which, we call our prana.
Right.
And now I've had the benefit, I've become a practitioner of Ayurvedic medicine and founded the Deep Yoga School of Healing Arts. And I've worked literally with hundreds, maybe thousands of clients. And I've seen through the application of the science on a disciplined and a devoted basis, people perform what we might call miracles in their life, overcoming diabetes, cancer, heart disease, obesity, a whole host of problems.
Right.
Not everybody. This is not, the miracle.
It's not a miracle. There's a method. Unfortunately, people don't know the method because the modern Western science doesn't have enough data to actually prove or demonstrate what happens or how it happens. That does not mean the phenomenon doesn't exist. The problem is people are throwing the baby with the bathtub.
This is so true. And, we have to look at the fact that modern Western science that wants to follow this Cartesian model of a double-blind study so that it has its particular kind of data. Look, there have been some wonderful things come out of that. I don't dispute that. But also look over the past several decades how that medical paradigm of research has approved a whole host of pharmaceutical medications that have killed people, that have cost them their lives, has approved surgeries that have killed or crippled people, chemotherapy protocols that have destroyed people's lives. So that is not the end all and the be all.
It is certainly not. Just so you know, my doctoral work was in the philosophy and of science and research methods. So there are a variety of research methods, and in the last few years, if I might say, at least 100 years, the pendulum has shifted from the positivist, logical, David Hume kind of approach, where everything is interconnected and cause and effects are related, and until we see them, nothing is proven, which is true, no doubt. But that is not the only way. There is the more relativistic approach to science, and psychology has moved from that maze and the rats to other ways. And you mentioned something that really caught my attention: gratitude, compassion, loving kindness. In the last 10 years, there's a change that has taken place in psychology. It's called positive psychology. So previous to that, it was all looking at, faulty minds, so to speak, the negativity. Right. Now they're looking at the positive side, and exactly same words were spoken by the American Psychological Association president, Dr. Segelman, I don't remember his name, that what we have discovered empirically with data, that gratitude, there are 4 elements to positive psychology: to be happy, to be successful. And one of them is gratitude. Other is compassion. Love and kindness is also there. Plus alignment with your true self, which I call, the Sanskrit word is swabhav, which you may be
familiar
Yes.
with, that being aligned with your true self.
Living your dharma.
Yes,
Yeah.
your dharma, living your dharma.
Living your dharma. Yeah.
And all these things there, people just don't recognize that how powerful the concept is. And the science behind yoga is not science the Western way. It's
Right.
there. It's just that you cannot take the roadmap of the Western scientific methods and lay them down on them yet. It doesn't mean it's not there. It's just that we don't know exactly how it works. And modern science is getting into it. Now they're trying to figure out, they have enough data because you've got millions of people doing yoga. But the experimental stuff that you talked about, double-blinded, experimental versus control group tests will happen. But there is quasi-experimental work that has been done. Quasi is the kind where you don't control experiments. You look at information and say, what are the causes? And they are demonstrating some of the things that you're talking about. But it'll take modern science some time to get to the point where you are, and you sort of bumped into it, and you have your own theory, which we want to get into. But the stochastic or statistical data to prove that that theory is the right one will take some time. So we want to get into your theory, right? So you said you actually took care of your cancer, or you think that your practice in Ayurveda, which is the ancient Indian medical practice, the oldest, I believe, if not the oldest, one of the oldest, and
Yes.
And then, which fundamentally, by the way, is about what you put in your body. It's not fixing things,
And in your mind.
And in your mind. And what do you put in your body, which is what I think Aristotle used to say as well about health, or Plato, I don't know who said that. But your medicine is what you put in your body. So it's the Ayurveda is that kind. Plus, you did yoga, which is a whole body mind system, which says that your mind controls. It's integral part of your body, and it controls the chemicals. It controls everything else. Therefore, it has the capacity. And I might want to add something else, which again takes us into a non-business, non-scientific way. But because it is important, I'll say it. The Gospel of St. Thomas, which was discovered in 1945, apparently said, and I'm not sure if that is all true or not, but I'll just say it anyways, that Christ said, you turn the stone and you will find me, and the kingdom of God lies within you. Whatever your conceptualization of God, it certainly includes the spirit or the consciousness. And that consciousness has the power. You can be whoever you want to be. And so to some extent, I believe that, your mind has the capacity to heal your body and to take you to levels that are unheard of.
We all have a power within us from which we have largely been disenfranchised from a very overstimulated, externalized mass media culture. Modern science, in some of its tests, has something they call the placebo effect. And they try to statistically remove it and negate it. But what that is really is your power of self-healing and your power of positive thought. They're sort of always catching up with what the ancient yogis knew thousands of years ago and calling it modern discoveries, such as the fact that positive thoughts create a different neuropeptide panel inside of your body as negative thoughts. Negative thoughts, as we know, create fight or flight, adrenaline, and cortisol, which is really good if your life is at risk. But every day, if you're in that low level of stress, fight or flight, you're poisoning yourself and diminishing your immune system and your capacity to metabolize the nutrients of the food that you ingest. If you're in the sympathetic nervous system, if you are more relaxed and more positive, you're in the parasympathetic nervous system, you're creating neuropeptides associated with healing, with balancing your body, and with homeostasis. And this is all part of it, because whatever thought you anchor into, the whole world is going to rise up to support that. If you go out the rest of your day feeling very negative about people, you'll meet a lot of negative people.
Yes.
If you go out with a completely different attitude that I'm really going to love people and have a positive attitude, you'll meet a lot of loving people.
And an easy example of that is you buy a slightly not esoteric but uncommon car. Let's say you buy a Mercedes CLS 550, and now you notice Mercedes CLS 550.
I use that in some of my lectures. It's so interesting to hear you say that. You want a new car, that's all you will see.
Yeah.
the world tends to show you where you are in your mind. And if you have a very negative attitude, I'm going to die from cancer, I can't heal myself, there is no hope, everything is negative, you're enhancing the chance that that's going to be the outcome in your
And
life.
one of the concepts in the ancient Vedic tradition is it's that it's just you. There is nothing else around the world. I mean, I'm not going to getting into the spirituality side of it, but bulk of the control is in you. It's not that there is a outer spirit or somebody that's helping you do things. It's how you respond and what you see around you. That is what is happening with your attitude. And to clarify a little bit for the audience, the placebo effect fundamentally is when you see control group and a treatment group, which means you give sugar pills to one group, random, and another random group, you give them a treatment, whatever it is. You will actually find that if the treatment is good, the treatment group performed well, but also the placebo group, because the placebo group did not know they weren't getting a treatment. That placebo effect is what we're talking about. Now, here's the beauty of this. There's no such thing as a placebo effect. It's an aggregate, an average of everybody else. Some people will have a massive placebo effect, others will not. And that is determined by your attitude and how much positivism you have.
This is so true. It's the power of positive thinking, and it really is a scientific fact, and we understand that now. And moving back to taking charge of our lives, here's the other piece. Most of us don't want to have self-discipline. We want a pill to fix us, a surgery to fix us, a procedure so we don't make any effort. We don't want to make changes in our life. But the real way to heal and to grow and to transform our lives is finding that inner power and having self-discipline. I mean, you brush your teeth every day, don't you? And if you just say, oh, I know about brushing my teeth, but you don't do it, you're going to have bad breath and ultimately dental decay and expensive bills and pain, and no one's going to want to talk to you very close up. So you do it every day. It's a positive habit. It's a daily discipline. Well, you have to have a positive daily habit to be happy, to be relaxed. You have to have a positive daily habit to eat proper food, to do proper exercise, to nourish yourself in body and mind and spirit. It's not just going to happen to you.
Yes. And I'll tell you one more thing. Yes, absolutely. I'll tell you one more thing. I do pranayama occasionally, not every day. I'm not very disciplined, but I do it. And whenever I have asthma, whenever it flares up, I am more rigorous about my pranayama practice. Otherwise, I back off. And I'm feeling all right, I back off. And that's a bad thing. But I did realize this. While there is a certain effect of pranayama by itself, the belief in pranayama is more important than the pranayama itself.
I think this is so true. It does have powerful effects because it oxygenates your blood and it puts you more into the parasympathetic nervous system because a deep breath is more relaxing. But that element of, as you know from your heritage of Shraddha, of having faith in yourself and in what your pursuits are, has incredible power. The more you believe in what you do, and you understand its intelligence, so you're not believing in a fairy tale or in somebody who has ulterior motives, but you're believing in a real lasting truth, like the wisdom of yoga, which has lasted thousands and thousands of years. The more you deeply believe in it, the more it's going to serve you well.
And, I talk to a lot of entrepreneurs, CEOs, successful people, and I realize, and there's also research to that effect, that these entrepreneurs who are successful tend to have belief in their success compared to the others that fail.
So, I've had the honor now of working with some executive forums, of doing executive coaching and speaking to some major medical conferences and such. And I find the executives who take a more conscious outlook towards their employees, who bring in consciousness and who bring in these balancing and these healing practices into their own lives as well as into their employees' lives, almost inevitably they have greater success than those who are just focused on grinding hard work and absolutely maximizing profits. That when they bring consciousness in to their corporate world, wonderful things begin to happen.
And we have seen that the top down has literally faded away. And we have seen the growth of the economy since the change. So I am not saying cause and effect, but you can see the correlation there. That, you have changed your approach, your attitudes, and now people are more contributive. They are more driven by what they do. This is the change in the psychology that has taken place. Unfortunately, all this existed in the knowledge in the yogic tradition, but and I think we've seen a lot of growth from 5% to now 8% people are practicing yoga. So we have seen the growth, but there are a lot of people who still have questions or complete lack of awareness. But we also find that the more educated, more successful people, more open-minded people, richer people are more inclined to practice yoga, or you find more of the people who practice yoga to be richer, educated, open-minded, willing to try new things.
And female. About 80%. And I think part of it is because I think there is more natural compassion and loving kindness in the feminine gender of the human species. There's more nurturing.
I believe they're more intuitive. And then the research shows they're more intuitive, multitasking. So they tend to be, in general, I'm not saying every woman is that way or every man is that way, but in general, you find that women tend to be open to these ideas. But the beauty is you don't have to be what I call left-wing, ultra-liberal person to do yoga. You can be alpha.
No, and you don't have to be a Hindu. And you don't have to leave your particular religion. There are some very conservative right-wing elements of certain religions that feel that yoga is very dangerous, only because they might lose control of their flock. But, we have many, in my classes and in my retreats, I have Jewish people, Muslim people, Buddhists, Christians, Hindus, of course, atheists, agnostics. It's not a religion, as some argue, but it is ultimately a spiritual practice. It is something much, much more than just exercise.
And there's a misperception from my perspective, from where I sit. Spiritual doesn't mean you have to believe in the existence of God or existence of a spirit, but you do have to believe there is consciousness, and you can't deny it.
And something greater than just your individual ego self, that there's a bigger picture, because I don't run the world. My ego is not reality. And there's 6.5 billion of us with our egos. And if every one of our egos ran the world, we'd have to have 6.5 billion different worlds.
But also another thing is that the ego, the differentiation, and I think we might be going on a tangent, but since we've touched upon it, ego and the bigger self is still within yourself. You don't have to necessarily believe in anything outside of you, because we don't know anything about outside of you. Whatever it is happening inside. You have to have the right belief system that your consciousness, your abilities to change your own thinking and thereby change your own body, thereby change your environment, is all within you.
That's right.
If you like to believe in a God,
it's an inner journey.
Yeah.
It's always an inner journey.
Yes, it's an inner journey. Absolutely.
And you can change your destiny this way. And this is really what transformation means. Transformation isn't some mystical thing of levitating and sitting on a mountain or crawling into a cave and chanting Om for the rest of your life. It's changing your thoughts, which change your actions. Your actions, when they are changed, they create new, more positive habits. Those positive habits determine your character, and your character determines your destiny.
Absolutely.
So by changing your thoughts, you have the capacity to change your destiny.
Absolutely.
And that is truly what transformation is.
And I since you mentioned this, I do want to talk about it a little bit. There is this perception among some, the kind that was promoted by Bhagwan Rajneesh back in the 80s, I think, in the US, 96 Rolls Royce, and you watch some of their videos, and I can clearly see anybody with any religious mindset will decry that. I mean, it's completely, if you've seen it out of context. But the truth is, those are not necessarily what you need to go after. Ignore that. Just because somebody abuses alcohol doesn't make alcohol necessarily bad. It depends upon you. Nuclear power can be used for constructive purposes or for destructive purposes. Do not ignore the power that exists. How you want to use it and approach is up to you. Some idiot, and I do not mean to say to anyone that Rajneesh was an idiot. I don't know him. I don't know anything about him. But assuming there is somebody whom you think of an idiot, the idiot is doing something wrong with alcohol or with the nuclear power. If you want to use nuclear power of alcohol or alcohol to your advantage, you can enjoy a glass of wine, 2 glasses of wine, and have a good life and have free energy.
Well, Nick, in every walk of life, there are good people and bad people. There are good soldiers and bad soldiers, good police and good and bad politicians, though the good ones are getting more difficult to find these days. You know, we've had Catholic priests that have done some very bad things, and we have Catholic priests that have famously served the world. We have had yoga gurus who have misused their position and got caught up in their ego, and we have had other yoga gurus who have changed thousands and thousands of lives and been beautiful examples of the human capacity. None of us walk on water. None of us is perfect. We have to be careful not to get too caught up with ourselves. I personally, though I teach and I practice, I tell everyone I am not a guru. I don't have any pretensions to that sort of thing. I'm a teacher, and as a teacher, I'm your servant, because the guru ultimately is you, is looking into yourself and finding your own inner power, not looking externally and surrendering your power to someone else. Because when you do that, you can have a lot of problems.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I completely agree with you. Now, let me change the topic a little bit to get into the depth of this idea of how did you actually heal? It's an anomaly for someone to be in stage 4 cancer to come back without medicine.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to talk about that?
Well, it all works together. There's not one thing. All the practices that I did created a synthesis and a synergy. And so changing my mind from the negative thoughts that created so much cortisol and adrenaline in my system. So I changed my inner chemistry through consistent, regular, daily, positive affirmation. I changed my body through organic veganism and massive fasting. I fasted for days at a time, so I purified my body. Everything I ate became organic and vegetarian. And I reduced 80 pounds, which is a tremendous purification in and of itself, and reduced and eliminated the cancer, big part of it. By becoming more flexible and more balanced through the yoga postures, I created more strength and stability and flexibility in my body. Everything flows better and eliminates better. Through deep breathing, we actually eliminate a lot of toxins through deeper and deeper breathing. And when you're doing twists in yoga postures, it's like taking your organs and wringing them out in a twist. And then when you come out of that and you breathe in deeply, this oxygenated blood floods into those organs. And imagine it's like rinsing a dirty wash rag. So I was purifying my life on all levels. I turned off the TV. I turned on my exposure to nature. I got up with the sunrise. I went to see the sunset every day. I retuned my life from the static rhythms of an overstimulated, stressful society that we live in to the more natural rhythms of nature. And all of those things conspired together to give me the maximum opportunity to heal, which I'm truly grateful for happened in my life.
And so you did not actively go out and say, I'm going to do this and heal myself. It happened that you did the right things, and these were the results.
I listened to an inner voice. We all have an inner voice. Some of us call it our gut instinct. How many times have we said, I knew I shouldn't have done that. I knew I shouldn't have made that choice. But so often we're stuck in a very busy mind and we're not listening to this deeper wisdom. That scientists have now found neural cells, which are considered brain cells, in the actual organ of the heart. That we have a deeper spiritual intelligence that's far beyond the ego-based intelligence, which is important.
I did not know that.
It's our heritage. It comes down through our DNA. We have the wisdom of humankind encoded inside of us, just like a tiny little acorn has all of the intelligence to grow a mighty oak tree and to grow more acorns and more oak trees throughout all time. There's intelligence in that acorn that's been handed down. We have that inside of us. Do you know that they have just discovered in an experiment with mice that they exposed them to some cherry blossom fragrance, and gave them a very negative experience in association with that exposure. And the children of those mice, when they were exposed to that fragrance, had a negative reaction. It was passed down. They were accessing an intelligence from their ancestors based upon life experience.
Actually, we call it hardwired, but it's not hardwired. If you look at ants and their behavior, the ant is almost like a conduit. A given ant is like a conduit of memory and experiences that flows from one ant to the other, and one dead ant to another. And it's kind of hard to, and this is a different discussion for another time perhaps, but the truth is there is research out there, and I'm so excited to hear that they found the neuro cells in heart, because we have always talked about think from your heart.
Think from your heart.
So then you get into complex situations, your heart will tell you what your mind is not able to.
I went to the wisdom of my soul. That's the soul that was speaking to me when I walked into that yoga room, and I said, this is it. Isn't it naturally intuitive and intelligent, and you know at the soul level that if you put better food in your body than you're putting now, you're going to be healthier? That if you put better thoughts in your mind and cut out all of the negativity and the overstimulation of mass media, that you are going to be more peaceful and calm? I don't even think you need a scientific experiment for this, because it is so obvious. Don't you know at the level of your heart that if you are a more honest, more peaceful, kinder, gentler, more balanced human being, that life's going to go a little bit better than if you're just angry and judgmental and arrogant and have a whole host of negative attitudes? These things are intuitive. And it's part of our deeper intelligence.
We've just been programming ourselves the wrong way in the new environment, because there's so much of control by the let's call it the capitalistic system, because a capitalistic system brings the best out of the market but the worst out of the human being, because it has a purpose. Yeah. So we are ingrained, and we forget that these are scripts written on top of our original script. If we go back to the original script, that's simpler and more correct. Otherwise, we are simply living a script prescribed by the corporates to their own gain.
Exactly. It's called consumerism. And if I can keep you relatively unhappy being Nick Vaidya, and as you know, Vaidya means wisdom. So if I can keep you from that wisdom, and I can keep you unhappy and dissatisfied in your life, then I can sell you a whole host of products and promise you happiness in each of those products, and you're never fulfilled, so you spend the rest of your life, what I call, looking for God in all the wrong places.
And the wrong places.
Always looking externally for fulfillment, healing, satisfaction, and wholeness, when it's been inside of you all along.
I give an example to my daughter, the older one. My oldest is 13 years old, now going to be 14. And I've been telling her, look at that advertisement where they talk about, show you a man or a woman grabbing breakfast through the bar and running and feeling proud about it, that I don't have any time for anything else.
Yes.
And they don't even know this is a script being written in your head by somebody else, so that you work harder, spend money on that bar, live a miserable life, and feel happy about it, and say, I'm free.
Mm-hmm. In the 1920s, let me try to tell you this very quickly. A man named Edward Bernays was in the Third Reich. They came and they invaded his country, and he fled. Right? His uncle was Sigmund Freud. So Edward Bernays, he left when the Third Reich marched into his homeland, and he fled, and he came to America, and he landed in New York City, and he was one of the founders of Madison Avenue, and he understood what Sigmund had taught about the mind. So his whole theory was called, if we can control the group mind, we can control their behavior. His first big success was with the tobacco. Women didn't smoke. That was a 50% market that the very powerful tobacco companies wanted. So he created a campaign around suffragettes, the women fighting for the right to vote. They had a big parade in New York City. He planted some beautiful, buxom models as suffragettes in the parade, and when they got to the media, They all pulled out their cigarettes and declared them their torches of freedom. And then they launched an advertising campaign, and within a decade, 50% of American women were smoking too and killing themselves with cancer. And if you would have told any of them that's not a lifestyle choice, you were programmed, you were brainwashed to do that by mass marketing, they'd slap you in the face and say, no, this is my decision. But they were influenced by these suggestions, seeing beautiful women in advertisements no longer vacuuming and cooking, but enjoying their life, all associating it with the cigarette that kills you. And that's how we surrender our consciousness to mass marketing, lose touch with this deeper self of who we really are, and we spend our lives stressed out and looking in all the wrong places to find some sort of escape from that stress.
And you have to recognize this from this very example that you gave. This is an amazing example and a wonderful one. I'm going to look it up and put it in my repertoire of content that I use often. But if you think about it, I lost my train of thoughts here, but this reprogramming is very potent. And the American Medical Association is funded by the pharmaceutical companies. Do you think pharmaceutical companies have an interest in yoga or in alternative medicine? Should they have any interest? None.
They have no interest. They have an interest in suppressing it. They have an interest in promoting their bottom line profits. And do you know how many people die? Google it. How many people die from pharmaceutical medications every year? It's staggering. How many recalls do we see? How many lawsuits? How many deformed babies? How much pain and suffering? Now, there are some pharmaceutical medications that have been miraculous. I'm not condemning the entire industry, but it is so powerful and so profit-based and so greedy. And these double-blind studies that they believe in often are skewed. They take out certain evidence. We have seen so many reports of them being falsified or certain findings being dismissed or put on the back shelf. And it's terrible. It's not the answer to our problems. The answer
there's so many examples of FDA approving the wrong things. And that's part of the process. And there's nothing wrong with the modern medicine. This is great. But that's not the whole picture.
So you spend your whole life eating pepperoni pizza, jalapeno peppers, and drinking beer, and you have an acid stomach, terrible acid stomach, and the pharmaceutical industry says pay a whole lot of money, take a purple pill. There's a lot of side effects, but it'll stop your acid stomach. And we have proof. We have a double-blind study, and the yogi or the Ayurvedic practitioner will say, stop eating pepperoni pizza, stop drinking so much beer, and stop taking all the jalapeno peppers, and eat, rice and mung beans and a little bit of ghee, and your stomach will be better in time. And there's no side effects, and it doesn't cost you money.
And nobody's saying that everybody has to stop drinking beer. Everything in moderation is okay, depending upon what do you want from your life. But you've got to ask yourself the question, what do I want from my life? And what am I willing to pay for that?
I think that's another important point you're making, in the yoga world. There's a lot of people who grab onto these practices so hard that they become sort of fundamentalist, and their life, I think, gets dry and gets constricted. And moderation is absolutely the key, because if you overdo any path in any direction, you become a fundamentalist. And we know what fundamentalism has done throughout history to the world. It hasn't been a blessing.
Absolutely. And those who study the script, the ancient knowledge, so to speak, I don't have any better word for that, but wherever you study from Buddhists or from philosophy, from Aristotle, wherever you go, you will find that balance is the center of almost everything.
It's the same thing. It's all harmony, balance, an inner journey rather than an external journey, letting go of the ego, living more from a deeper place of awareness, in a sense that we're all in this together. That's why we call it a universe, not a multiverse. Exactly. It's a single song.
A single word.
We're all in the chorus together.
Yes, it's unified. It's unified. Absolutely. You know what? This has been an amazing conversation, Bhava. I really, really enjoyed it. And I wish I could go on and on, but I wanted to remain true to my focus, and perhaps at another time. And I'm hoping that we would find a reason to take these conversations deeper and into more helpful content, because I'm talking with the CEO of Aetna,
We are still trying to work out the schedule, and CEO of Overstock.com. Both of them are really heavy yoga practitioners. So I want to create content that really gets people to say, let me look into this at least. And then hopefully if we can create greater content to help people, not just about yoga for health, but how do you live your life? How do you make your decisions? How do you perceive things more correctly? How do you see things more truer to what they are rather than seeing a snake, a rope for a snake? Make better decisions.
I would like to say if somebody wants to know a little bit more about my personal journey, they can access online through Amazon.com or anywhere Warrior Pose, which is my memoir of how yoga literally saved my life. And it tells my story of journalism, of the broken back, and my little boy, and ultimately healing through these modalities. So Warrior Pose is the book, and I hope some of your viewers might enjoy reading that as well.
Absolutely. And I see that right behind you is the cover of the book, right?
That's the cover of the book, yeah.
Wonderful, Bhava. Excellent. And I am really, again, thankful for the time that you have shared with us.
So nice to be with you. Thank you. It's been an honor.
Likewise. Bye-bye.